The rain fell like bullets against the thick glass windows of the colony ship. Commander Jake Mitchell pressed his face closer to the viewport, watching the endless storm rage across the surface of Kepler 442c. Lightning split the dark sky every few seconds, and waves the size of mountains crashed against the floating platforms below. This was supposed to be humanity's new home. Instead, it looked like hell covered in water. "Sir, we're losing another platform," Lieutenant Amy Foster called from her station. Her voice was tight with worry. "The storm has been going for 6 days straight. The support structures can't take much more." Jake turned away from the window and walked to the command center. Around him, dozens of officers worked at their stations, trying to keep the colony alive. Red warning lights flashed. On every screen, the air smelled of metal and fear. "How many people are still down there?" Jake asked. 347, Amy replied. "Dr. Carter is with them, trying to get the biolabs working again." Jake nodded but felt his stomach twist. Dr. Lisa Carter was one of Earth's best scientists. If she couldn't figure out how to make this world work for humans, nobody could. But Jake had seen this story before. 3 colonies on 3 different water worlds, and all of them had failed. The ocean planets seemed to hate everything human. Down on the floating platform, Lisa pulled her waterproof jacket tighter as she ran between the laboratory buildings. The wind tried to knock her over with every step. She had been studying the water samples for weeks, and what she found made no sense. The ocean wasn't just hostile to human life. It seemed to be fighting back on purpose. "The pH levels keep changing," she explained to her assistant, Dr. Tony Reed, as they reached the main lab. "Yesterday the water was too acidic. Today it's too basic. It's like something is controlling the chemistry." Tony looked at the test results on his tablet. Water dripped from his hair onto the screen. "Maybe it's the local bacteria. They could be reacting to our presence." Lisa shook her head. "No, this is different. Look at these patterns." She pointed to a graph on her computer. "The changes happen exactly when our equipment gets close to working. It's like the ocean knows what we're trying to do and stops us." A loud crash outside made them both jump. Through the lab window, they could see one of the underwater mining robots being torn apart by something huge and glowing. Tentacles the size of tree trunks wrapped around the machine and pulled it into the dark water. "That's the 5th robot this week," Tony said quietly. Lisa watched the creature disappear into the depths. She had been tracking these attacks, and they weren't random. The sea monsters always struck when the humans were making progress. They destroyed equipment, blocked supply lines, and scared away the few fish that humans could eat. It was like they were working together. High above the storm, Captain Ben Rodriguez sat in his cabin aboard the UES Horizon, reading the latest reports from Earth Command. The news wasn't good. 7 water worlds, 7 failed colonies. The government was running out of money and patience. More importantly, they were running out of planets to colonize. Ben had been fighting for water world colonization for 5 years. He believed humans could adapt to any environment if they tried hard enough. But even he was starting to have doubts. The ocean worlds didn't just kill humans with storms and monsters. They seemed to study them, test them, and find them wanting. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Amy Foster stepped inside, still dripping from her trip outside. "Sir, we just got word from Earth Command. They're recalling all Waterworld missions." Ben felt his heart sink. "All of them?" "Yes, sir. Admiral Williams says. The projects are too expensive and too dangerous. We're supposed to pack up and leave within the week." Ben stared at the reports on his desk. Somewhere in those numbers were the dreams of thousands of colonists who had hoped to build new lives on the water worlds. Now they would have to go back to the crowded cities of Earth or try their luck on the desert planets, where at least the environment didn't fight back. "Send word to Dr. Carter," Ben said finally. "Tell her to pack up her research. We're going home." But down in the depths of the ocean, something was watching the human colony with ancient eyes. The entity that the humans would later know as Deep Current had been observing these strange visitors for months. The creatures from the dry worlds were weak and clumsy in the water, but they kept trying. They built machines to breathe underwater. They created shelters that could survive the storms. They studied the ocean life with careful attention. Most species gave up after the first test. They would arrive on a water world, see the storms and the monsters, and leave immediately. But these humans were different. They stayed, they adapted, they learned. Even when the ocean threw everything it had at them, they found ways to survive a little longer each time. Deep current sent out a pulse of bioelectric energy, communicating with the other guardians of the deep. The consensus was clear. These humans had passed the first level of testing. They had shown persistence in the face of impossible odds, but they weren't ready for contact yet. They still thought like surface dwellers trying to conquer the water instead of joining with it. The great storms began to calm as the human ships prepared to leave. The sea monsters retreated to the deepest trenches. For the first time in months, the ocean around the colony became almost peaceful. Lisa noticed the change immediately. "The water chemistry is stabilizing," she told Jake over the radio. "The pH levels are normal for the first time since we arrived." Jake looked out at the suddenly calm seas. Maybe the planet is saying goodbye. Lisa packed her research data with careful hands. She had learned more about alien ocean life in 6 months than most scientists learned in their entire careers. The creatures here were not just intelligent. They were organized, purposeful, and incredibly advanced, but they had chosen to remain hidden. As the last human shuttle lifted off from the floating platforms, Lisa took one final look at the ocean surface. Something large moved just beneath the waves, keeping pace with their ship. For a moment, she thought she saw lights arranged in patterns too complex to be natural. Then the creature dove deep and vanished into the blue darkness. The colony ships left Kepler 442c behind, but they carried with them data that would prove crucial in the years to come. Hidden in Lisa's research files were clues about the true nature of the water worlds. The storms weren't natural disasters, the attacks weren't random animal behavior. Everything that had happened was a test, and humanity had barely begun to understand what they were being tested for. In the depths of a dozen water worlds, ancient intelligences watched the human ships depart and began to prepare. The dry worlders would return someday, and when they did, they would face a choice that would determine the fate of both species. The ocean was patient. It could wait. 5 years had passed since the last Waterworld colony failed. Admiral Kate Williams stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching another human fleet burn in space. The Zarathi Empire had come from beyond the outer rim, and they were winning every battle. Their ships looked like moving crystals, all sharp edges and glowing light. Human weapons barely scratched their armor. "Retreat to Sector 7, Kate ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "All ships, fall back now." The bridge shook as another Zarathi energy beam struck their shields. Through the viewport, Kate could see 3 human cruisers breaking apart, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. This was the 4th major defeat in 2 months. At this rate, the Zarathi would reach Earth before winter. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the Titan colony," her communications officer called out. "The Zarathi landed there 3 hours ago. The colony is gone." Kate closed her eyes for a moment. Titan colony had 500,000 people. Now it was just another dead rock floating in space. The Zarathi didn't take prisoners. They didn't negotiate. They came. They took what they wanted, and they left nothing alive behind. Far from the battle, Dr. Paul Martinez worked alone in his small laboratory aboard the research ship UES Discovery. While most scientists had been drafted to work on new weapons, Paul studied the enemy. He had collected pieces of destroyed Zarathi ships and spent months trying to understand how they worked. The aliens were made of living crystal, he had discovered. Their bodies were like walking gemstones, hard and beautiful and deadly. But Paul had found something interesting in their communication signals. The Zarathi never attacked certain types of planets. They avoided worlds with too much water in the atmosphere. Paul pulled up a star chart on his computer. Red dots marked every planet the Zarathi had attacked. Blue dots showed the worlds they had ignored. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Every blue dot was a water world or had oceans covering most of its surface. They can't handle water, Paul whispered to himself. Their crystal bodies must dissolve or something. He started typing quickly, pulling up old files from the failed water world colonies. If the Zarathi couldn't survive in water-rich environments, then humanity's greatest failures might become their only hope. Commander Jake Mitchell had spent the last 5 years fighting pirates and smugglers in the outer colonies. The water world. Disaster had ended his career in exploration, but it had made him a better soldier. Now he sat in a war council meeting on Luna Station, listening to generals talk about their hopeless situation. We've lost 60% of our fleet, General Clark was saying. Our weapons don't work against their armor. Our ships are too slow. At this rate, we'll be extinct in 6 months. Jake had heard enough. He stood up from his chair. What about the water worlds? The room went quiet. Everyone knew about Jake's failed mission to Kepler 442c. It had been in all the military reports as an example of what not to do. Sit down, Mitchell, General Clark said coldly. We're talking about real solutions here. This is a real solution, Jake insisted. Dr. Martinez has proof that the Zarathi can't survive in water. The ocean worlds we couldn't colonize might be exactly what we need now. General Clark laughed. You want us to hide underwater like fish? Those worlds nearly killed us when we were at peace. What makes you think we can survive there during a war? Jake looked around the room at the tired faces of the other officers. Because we won't be alone this time. Something intelligent lives in those oceans, something that tested us and found us wanting before. Maybe if we ask for help instead of trying to conquer their worlds, they'll listen. The room erupted in arguments. Half the officers thought Jake was crazy. The other half were desperate enough to try anything. In the end, Admiral Williams made the decision. She authorized one ship to return to the water worlds, not to colonize them, but to ask for help from whatever lived in their depths. Captain Nina Brooks volunteered to lead the mission. She was young for a captain, but she had served under Jake during the original Waterworld expeditions. She knew the risks better than anyone. Dr. Lisa Carter joined the mission too. She had never stopped studying the data from Kepler 442c, and she believed Jake was right about the intelligence in the oceans. The UES Voyager launched from Earth 3 days later. It was a small ship, designed for exploration rather than war. They couldn't afford to send a big fleet even if they wanted to. Every large ship was needed to slow down the Zarathi advance toward Earth. Where are we going first? Nina asked as they entered hyperspace. Lisa checked her star charts. Tiamat 7. It's the closest water world, and my sensors detected the strongest signs of organized intelligence there. The journey to Tiamat 7 took 4 days. During the trip, Lisa worked with Dr. Tony Reed to design new communication equipment. If they were going to talk to alien sea creatures, they needed tools that could work underwater. They built bioelectric translators and chemical analyzers, hoping they could figure out how the ocean dwellers communicated. Jake spent the journey planning their approach. The last time humans had come to a water world, they had tried to build colonies and take resources. This time they would come as guests asking for help. It was a small difference, but Jake hoped it would matter. When they arrived at Tiamat 7, the planet looked as hostile as ever. Massive storms covered half the surface and the oceans were dark and rough. But this time the human ship didn't try to land or build anything. Instead, they went into orbit and sent out a simple radio message. We are humans from Earth, the message said. We know you are there. We know you are intelligent. We don't want to take your world. We need your help. An enemy is destroying our people. Please talk to us. For 2 days, nothing happened. The crew started to think they had made a mistake. Maybe there was no intelligence in the oceans. Maybe the patterns they had seen were just coincidence. Then, on the 3rd day, something huge rose from the deepest trench of Tiamat 7. It was bigger than their ship, a creature of flowing water and glowing light. Behind it came others, dozens of them, moving together like a living fleet. They had been waiting at the bottom of the ocean, watching the human ship with ancient eyes. Lisa's instruments went crazy as the creatures approached. They were communicating with each other using bioelectric fields and chemical signals. The water around them changed color and temperature as they talked. It was like watching an entire conversation happen in light and chemistry. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice shaking with excitement. "I think they're trying to talk to us." Nina stared at the incredible sight outside their ship. The ocean creatures moved like dancers, their bodies creating patterns of light in the dark. Water. After 5 years of running from an enemy they couldn't defeat, humanity had finally found someone willing to listen. The first contact protocols began immediately. It would take days or weeks to establish real communication, but both species were trying. In the depths of Tiamat 7, ancient minds considered the request from the surface dwellers. The dry world creatures had returned, but this time they came, not as conquerors but as supplicants. The test was entering its final phase. The first real conversation between humans and the ocean dwellers took 3 weeks to achieve. Dr. Lisa Carter worked day and night with her team, trying to understand how the aliens communicated. They used colors, electric pulses, and chemical signals all at once. It was like trying to learn a language made of light, lightning, and smell. The leader of the ocean creatures called itself something that translated roughly to deep current. It was ancient beyond human understanding, older than human civilization itself. Deep current spoke through waves of bioelectric energy that made Lisa's equipment spark and hum. "Your kind has returned." Deep current's message finally came through clearly. "But you are different now. Before, you came to take. Now you come to ask." Commander Jake Mitchell floated in the communication chamber they had built, wearing a special suit that let him survive underwater. The pressure here would have crushed a normal human, but the suit kept him alive. Around him, smaller ocean creatures swam in circles, their bodies glowing with curiosity. "We were wrong before," Jake said, into his suit's transmitter. "We thought your worlds were empty. We didn't know you were there, testing us." Deep Current's reply came as a wave of warm water and flashing lights. "We have tested many species over the ages. Most fail quickly. They see our storms and flee. You stayed longer than most. You tried to adapt instead of simply conquer." Dr. Lisa Carter listened to the conversation from the ship above. She was recording everything, trying to understand not just what the aliens were saying, but how they thought. These creatures saw the universe in ways humans couldn't imagine. They thought in 3 dimensions, moved like living water, and had minds that worked like entire ecosystems. "The crystal beings that hunt your people," Deep Current continued. "We know of them. They are devourers. They consume worlds and leave nothing behind. But they have a weakness you have discovered. Water," Jake said. "They can't survive in it." More than that, Deep Current pulsed with what might have been amusement. Water dissolves their very essence. They are creatures of dry places, of vacuum and crystal. In our realm, they become nothing. Captain Nina Brooks watched the exchange from the bridge of the Voyager. This was humanity's first real chance at an alliance with an alien species, and everything depended on getting it right. But the ocean dwellers weren't offering help for free. They had conditions. "If we are to fight together," Deep Current explained, "your people must change. You cannot battle in our realm with your current forms. The deep places would crush you. The pressure would kill you before you could strike a blow." Dr. Paul Martinez had been working on this problem since the first contact. He had studied the failed colonists' medical records and found that some humans could adapt to high-pressure environments better than others. With the right modifications, he believed humans could survive in the deep ocean long enough to fight. "We can change," Jake told Deep Current. "Our doctors can modify our bodies. We've done it before for space travel and low-gravity worlds." "This will be different," Deep Current warned. "To fight in our realm, you must become part water yourself. Your bones must bend like coral. Your blood must carry the pressure of the deep. Some of your people may not survive the change." Jake thought about the burning human ships he had seen in the war reports. Millions of people were already dying in the war against the Zerathi. If some humans had to risk their lives to save the rest, it was a price worth paying. "We'll do it," Jake said. The modifications began immediately. Dr. Paul Martinez set up a medical facility on Tiamat 7, working with the ocean dwellers to understand how human bodies could be changed. The aliens shared their knowledge freely, showing him how to strengthen bones for pressure, how to modify lungs to process water, and how to change nervous systems to handle the crushing depths. Captain Ben Rodriguez volunteered to be the first test subject. He had been with Jake during the original Waterworld missions, and he trusted the commander's judgment. The modification process took 6 hours. When Ben woke up, he could breathe water as easily as air. "How do you feel?" Paul asked, watching. Ben swam in the modification tank. Ben moved through the water like he had been born there. His modified body felt strange but powerful. He could see in the dark depths, and the crushing pressure felt comfortable instead of deadly. "I feel different," Ben said. His voice came through the water clearly, using new vocal cords designed for underwater communication. "But good different, like I finally fit somewhere." More volunteers came forward. Lieutenant Amy Foster was among the first, eager to adapt to humanity's new battlefield. The modification process was painful and dangerous. 2 volunteers didn't survive the changes, their bodies rejecting the alien technology. But for every failure, 3 successes gave humanity new underwater warriors. The training began in the deepest trenches of Tiamat 7. The modified humans learned to move in 3 dimensions, to think like water instead of like land creatures. The ocean dwellers taught them to use pressure as a weapon, to move silently through the depths, and to coordinate attacks across vast underwater distances. Amy Foster led the first squadron of modified human fighters. They called themselves the Deep Guard, and they moved through the water like living missiles. Each warrior was equipped with biomechanical weapons grown from coral and metal, tools that could function perfectly in the crushing environment of the deep ocean. "Swimming is not enough," Deep Current explained during one training session. "You must think like the ocean itself. Flow around obstacles, strike from unexpected angles, be everywhere and nowhere at once." Jake watched his people train and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. They were becoming something new, something that was no longer entirely human. But they were also becoming something that could save humanity from extinction. The first real test came when Zarathi scouts approached Tiamat 7. The crystal beings had finally noticed the unusual activity around the water world. 3 of their ships entered the system, scanning for threats. "Let them come." Deep Current pulsed with confidence. "Let them see what waits for them in the deep places." The Zarathi ships approached the planet cautiously. Their sensors showed only water and storms, nothing that could threaten their crystalline forms. They began to descend toward the surface, planning to investigate the strange energy readings they had detected. They never saw the attack coming. Ben Rodriguez led a squadron of Deep Guard warriors up from the deepest trenches, moving faster than anything the Zarathi had ever encountered. The modified humans struck the crystal ships from below, using weapons that fired concentrated streams of corrosive seawater. The Zarathi ships began to dissolve immediately. Their crystal armor, so strong against human energy weapons, melted, like sugar in the acidic water. The aliens inside screamed as their bodies broke apart, their crystalline forms unable to survive even brief contact with the ocean. Within minutes, all 3 Zarathi ships were destroyed. The Deep Guard warriors returned to the depths, leaving no trace of their presence except empty space where the enemy had been. "It works," Jake reported to Admiral Williams on Earth. "The Alliance works. We can fight them in the water worlds." The real war was about to begin. The Zarathi Empire's main fleet reached the solar system on a cold Tuesday morning. Admiral Kate Williams watched from Luna Station as thousands of crystal ships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of deadly jewels. They outnumbered the human fleet 10-1, and their weapons could destroy planets. "This is it," Kate said quietly to her officers. "If we lose here, Earth dies." The human defense fleet moved into position around Earth's moon. Every ship humanity could spare was there, but Kate knew it wouldn't be enough. The Zarathi had been winning every battle for months. Without help, this would be humanity's last stand. but help was coming from places the Zarathi never expected. Deep. Beneath Earth's oceans, in trenches so dark that light had never touched them, ancient creatures stirred. The Oceanic Collective had been preparing for this moment since the Alliance began. Massive bioships, grown rather than built, rose from the deepest parts of the Atlantic and Pacific. They were alive, breathing vessels that pulsed with their own heartbeat. Commander Jake Mitchell stood on the bridge of the bioship Leviathan, his modified body perfectly at home in the water-filled command center. Around him, other Deep Guard warriors swam through the living corridors, preparing for the battle that would decide humanity's fate. "All bioships report ready," Captain Nina Brooks announced through the bioelectric communication system. She commanded the Kraken, a massive creature ship bristling with organic weapons. "The collective is in position." Jake could feel the ship's excitement through his modified nervous system. The Leviathan wanted to fight, wanted to protect the small blue world that had given birth to these strange new allies. The bioships were not just vessels, but partners, as eager as their human crews to stop the crystal invaders. High above the Earth's surface, the Zarathi fleet began its attack. Energy beams that could melt mountains struck the human defense line. 3 cruisers exploded in the first minute, their crews dying in flashes of light. The crystal ships advanced steadily, their commanders confident in another easy victory. Admiral Kate Williams gave the order to retreat just as they had planned. The human fleet fell back toward Earth looking beaten and desperate. The Zarathi followed eagerly, sensing the kill. They never saw the ocean rising to meet them. The first bioship broke Earth's surface near the Pacific Ring of Fire, a creature the size of a city emerging from the depths like a living mountain. Water cascaded from its organic hull as it rose into space, propelled by organs that functioned like living rocket engines. Captain Ben Rodriguez piloted his fighter squadron out of the bioship's launch bays. His modified body let him survive in the vacuum of space as easily as in the deep ocean. Behind him, 100 other Deep Guard warriors followed, their biomechanical suits gleaming with moisture. The Zarathi fleet stopped advancing, confused by what they were seeing. Their sensors had detected no large ships in Earth's oceans. These massive creatures had appeared from nowhere, and their organic composition made them difficult to target with crystal-based weapons. "Attack pattern Delta," Jake commanded through the bioelectric network. "Flow around them like water, strike from all angles." The bioships moved like living tides, their organic hulls flowing and changing shape as they fought. They surrounded the Zarathi fleet in 3 dimensions, attacking from above, below, and all sides at once. The crystal ships, designed for straight-line combat, couldn't adapt to this fluid style of warfare. Dr. Lisa Carter watched the battle from the research vessel Discovery, now equipped with her own biomechanical interfaces. She could feel the thoughts of the ocean creatures as they fought, their ancient intelligence guiding the battle with strategic minds that thought in patterns humans could barely understand. "Launch the acid torpedoes," she commanded her section of the fleet. The bioships responded instantly, firing streams of concentrated seawater that had been chemically enhanced by the ocean dwellers. Where the liquid touched Zarathi armor, the crystal began to dissolve. The enemy fleet tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for dry environments. Energy beams that could destroy normal ships passed harmlessly through the bioships' water-filled hulls. The living vessels absorbed the attacks and kept coming, healing their wounds as they fought. Lieutenant Amy Foster led her Deep Guard squadron through the interior of a Zarathi dreadnought. The modified humans had cut through the crystal hull using biomechanical tools that secreted powerful acids. Inside the ship, they moved like water flowing through cracks, impossible for the crystal beings to catch or contain. The Zarathi crew screamed as Amy's team flooded their corridors with seawater. The crystal aliens began to dissolve immediately, their bodies breaking apart in the life-giving liquid that meant death to their kind. Within minutes, the massive dreadnought was empty, its crew turned to harmless mineral dust floating in contaminated water. "Another ship down," Amy reported, her voice carrying perfectly through the bioelectric communication system, moving to the next target. All across the battlefield, the same scene played out. Bioships flowed around crystal vessels like living oceans, while deep guard warriors struck from within. The Zarathi, so used to easy victories, found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. Deep Current itself had joined the battle, its ancient form larger than any human ship. The entity that had tested humanity for so long now fought beside them, its bioelectric weapons disrupting Zarathi systems across entire sections of their fleet. "You fought well when we tested you," Deep Current pulsed to Jake during a brief lull in the combat. "But you fight better when you fight with us instead of against us." Jake felt the truth of those words through his modified body. The humans weren't just fighting alongside the ocean dwellers. They had become part of them, part of a larger organism that spanned multiple worlds and species. The water worlds that had once seemed like humanity's greatest failure were now their greatest strength. The Zarathi fleet began to retreat, but the bioships followed them. There would be no escape, no regrouping for another attack. The crystal invaders had finally met an enemy that could dissolve them as easily as they had destroyed others. Captain Nina Brooks pursued the fleeing Zarathi command ship, her bio-vessel, Kraken, moving through space like it was swimming through an ocean. When she caught the enemy flagship, she didn't destroy it with weapons. Instead, she flooded it with water, watching through her ship's organic sensors as the crystal commanders dissolved into harmless minerals. The battle ended as the last Zarathi ship fell silent, its crew turned to dust by the simple presence of water. The great crystal fleet that had conquered half the galaxy was gone, defeated by an element so basic that most species took it for granted. In the aftermath, humanity found itself changed forever. The water worlds that had once driven away human colonists became the foundation of a new civilization. Dr. Paul Martinez established the first permanent underwater cities, where humans and ocean dwellers lived and worked together. The partnership, that had begun with failure and grown through necessity, had evolved into something greater than either species could have achieved alone. Earth's oceans, once seen as barriers to human expansion, became highways connecting the water worlds of a dozen star systems. Jake Mitchell, now more at home in the depths than on land, established the Deep Guard Academy in the Mariana Trench. There, the next generation of human-ocean hybrids learned to think in 3 dimensions, to move like living water, and to protect the alliance that had saved 2 species. The galaxy's water worlds, once avoided as dead zones, became the centers of the new interstellar civilization. Humanity had learned that sometimes survival meant not conquering the environment, but joining with it. In the deepest waters where pressure created strength and life thrived in impossible conditions, they had found not just allies, but a new way to be human.